Hello, and we are your landlords, flooding out and tapping out so that you don't have to with the occasional screw. My name is Graham, go by Hamhocks42 on the internet, and I'm joined by the one and only Astralsflame. Astrals, how's it going, man?
I'm doing good, bud. Happy Friday to you. How you doing today? And I
Happy
think today
Friday.
was an exciting Thursday and Friday for you, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Indeed. So yes, this as of this recording, we are just a few hours out from the servers being shut down on the streamer event, the early access event, as it's previously been known, where we got to play with a ton of Lost Caverns of Ixalan cards, and holy cow, that set is banana pancakes and was absolutely a blast. So I'm looking forward to that drop in the not too distant future. So yes, hooray for dinosaurs and whatnot. But that's not what we're here to discuss today, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, kind of is. We're there are new mechanics in Ixalan, but
Indeed.
are they really new?
I mean, have we had a new mechanic in Magic in some time? I guess is really the question we're trying to answer here today. And it's funny, every single set comes out and they bring with it 2 or 3 new mechanics every single time. And we just have to ask, why are they bothering to rename these things? Because let's be
Yeah.
real, they're all just kicker or arguably horsemanship. That's it. And that's the thesis for today. Why don't they just call everything kicker? Let's just call it what it is.
I don't know. They should just call everything kicker. And I guess,
Mhm.
what is kicker, right? Let's give an actual definition here. So kicker is a keyword ability, much like everything else. But this allows the player to pay an optional cost when casting a spell for an additional effect. So anything that could augment a spell, change the effect of a spell, adjust the spell, that's defined as a kicker at the moment.
Mhm. Yeah, and so cards that have like the actual word kicker on them usually come with some additional cost directly upon casting. But if we kind of expand our perspective and really kind of think about kicker in a broader sense, if at any point we're modifying the way that we are casting our spells and it changes the way that the card interacts, then let's be real. Like we're effectively adding a kicker component to it. And that is so ubiquitous within just how the game is played. And there's some, I don't know, some mechanics it's a little more obvious than others. We have, for example, we have cards that like when they enter, you can pay additional costs to do something. It's like, okay, you added the kicker cost on the ETB, not the cast. But let's be real. Come on, Skegger.
Let's
Your
kick it.
your bloodthirsty adversaries and the like. It's like, come on, that's just like we're just kicking this. And actually there's the new dinosaur in Ixalan, actually, the first of Gishath, whose name is escaping me.
Yes.
That does something similar. It's a 2-drop, and when it enters, you can pay 2, and you get an effect. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Kicker.
kicker. It's straight up kicker. Like it just behaves very similarly to kicker. I know obviously there's a nuanced difference, but still. Then we have other effects that are even more on the nose, like cleave. I straight up I
Yes.
like I understand again, I understand there's a subtle difference between playing an additional cost and playing an alternative cost. I do know those are different. But 95% of the time, Cleave just played out like a confusing kicker. That's all it was. Let's be real. That entire, like, I believe it was Crimson Vow where Cleave was introduced.
Yes, it
That
was.
whole set would have been so much easier to understand, and it would play 98% exactly the same if every card that had Cleave on it had just been retemplated to just be kicker. Like, would not have been hard. And
No,
I don't think there were any Cleave costs that were lower than the full cost, come to think of it.
there was not. Every cleave cost was at least more or introduced a new amount,
Mhm.
or an alternative way to play. I think Lantern Flare might be the odd one since it was like X red and white instead of just one and a white. But
Fair enough.
again, I mean, you're paying an X. And
Mhm.
okay, kind of jumping on this thing. Let's Cleave is a great example. What is Cleave if not overload, replacing certain words and an effect? And what is overload if not kicker?
Kicker. Overload is 100% kicker. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, overload is just hyper specific kicker. So every card
Exactly.
that has overload, if you pay the overload cost, again, additional cost versus alternate cost, sure, whatever. Like I think I'm gonna stop saying that. Just know, like nitpicking folks in the comments. By all means, please leave the comments. It's great, but just know that we know the difference. We do. We swear. Um, but yeah, with overload specifically, if you do the kicker, or if you pay the overload, they're all just changed to in the same way, you know. And so it was just kind of rather than templating every card to say, if you paid the kicker cost, do it to all potential targets instead. That just made it easier and streamlined it, which is what keywords are for. So okay, great. Like, yeah, that's fair. That's fine. Um, but yeah, so what are some other examples that come to mind for you when we think of variants of kicker?
So
Overload's awesome, by the way. Good call.
it,
Yeah.
Overload is it just as soon as you mentioned Cleveland, I'm like Overload straight to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think my
100%.
two favorite examples of classifying into kicker though are Echo, which is just simply delayed kicker, right? And
Oh, I don't miss
Flashback,
that.
that's graveyard kicker.
I know, right? Yeah, we're just adding the kicker cost of getting to play it again just later. And
Yeah,
buyback is another one. If you pay
buyback.
the buyback cost, it just goes to your hand instead of the graveyard. You just if this spell was kicked, return it to your hand. Yeah,
That's it. That's it.
that's all buyback is. 100%. Yeah, and it's funny too. Yeah, flashback and things like that is I don't know. I think that idea of the effect just being do the spell again, but with this additional cost that you can pay later. Yeah, it's funny if you think about it in more specific terms. I oftentimes think of mechanics in like three kind of pools as I'm just
Mhm.
kind of wrapping my brain around it. Recursive abilities like your flashbacks and your
Yeah.
unearths, those kinds of things, or your rebounds and things like
Mhm.
that. Which gets weird, by the way. Rebound is a weird
That
one.
is a weird
Um,
one.
yeah. And then you've got you got those recursive abilities, you got your kickers, which are just like you cast the thing, something changes depending on which mode you pick. Although I suppose modal spells also, and like Entwine is a great example of
It's kicker.
again, geez, just kicker. Like
Pay the
to the
two.
point where
Yeah.
I believe there have been cards that specifically say choose one mode if this spell was kicked, choose multiple. And it's like,
There is.
yep. Like that's just straight up like that was Entwine, and some of them haven't the word Entwine, some of them don't, based on what sets they were printed in, whether or not it
Mhm.
was evergreen. Um, I don't know, it's silly. Actually, one of the things that Wizards is starting to do that makes me so happy is they are starting to take old school keywords that appear on like one card in a set and just use it. That was
Yeah,
something that they haven't done in recent memory. Like in Phyrexia All V1, Raya Ivor has Battle Cry.
that's right. That was like a one-off introduction. And then
It's a one of Battle Cry. Yep.
the cycling,
And then,
and I think they
yep.
did specify cycling was going to be evergreen from now on, which was
Yes.
great to see. But that was also a good one. Like randomly, Ikoria had cycling, but then Capenna had it, and then they're like, yeah, we're just adding it, irregardless.
Yeah. Yeah, and there every now and then you see one or two. The other one is actually at the time Convoke has become more popular as well,
Yes, it
which
has.
that's a situation where you have a cost reduction by virtue of paying the alternate cost of tapping creatures rather than, paying mana.
Yeah, it's
Same
cost
is true with
reduction kicker.
improvise. It's cost reduction kicker,
Yeah,
exactly. The effect is just the cost is reduced. Great.
exactly. It's like
Um,
affinity for artifacts.
it's similar to Affinity in that regard. Exactly. Once you have the cost of having these things on the board, the effect is that the cost is reduced, like the mana cost is reduced. Yeah, I enjoy that kind of effect. I think they're cool about that. But the other one, there's a card that was from March of the Machine that has Madness, the Vampire Lord.
Yes.
Like again, random one off with Madness. Like this is a thing, I guess. I don't know. I love that they're willing to do that. I think that's really cool because there were so many times in the past when a new set would drop, and if a particular keyword didn't appear in that set, even if a card had mechanically that exact same thing, they wouldn't keyword it.
Yep.
And we saw it with Surveil. They finally evergreen Surveil and Windpack and errata a bunch of cards, which I'm really grateful for. But
Yes.
when like Eat to Extinction came out and it just had tacked on, look at the top card, you may put it in your graveyard. It was like, but this doesn't trigger the Dimir Spy Bug. What's up with that? Come on, guys. Anyway, so I'm glad that they finally are like, if it functions like the keyword, it just is that keyword. If you need to look up what the keyword is, fair enough. There are plenty of resources that can help you do that. And in a lot of cases, they'll put the reminder text like on those one-off
Yeah.
cards just to make it a little easier for people, and that's awesome. Yeah, big fan.
No, a huge fan of that. Like the synergies we get to see by doing that in other sets is really great. And just overall, it reintroduces to new players some of the older mechanics that they may have never experienced. If someone new has come in and is obviously like never played back when Madness was a thing, they're like, what is Madness? It opens up
Mhm.
their eyes to a new perspective, which is great. I mean, what would be a good example of one that'd be interesting to bring back? Transmute, the searching kicker,
Oh, Transmute. Yes, Transmute was fantastic.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Muddle the mixture. Holy cow. I have
Yeah,
that. Yeah, I had that in a handful of EDH decks when I was first getting into it.
I
Like,
did
you never
too.
know when you're
It's
going to need a specific 2-drop. Let's go.
well,
Yeah.
and that's it. And that, like, that's a great example of a tutoring kicker.
Well, but in that case, you don't get the original effect, though.
You don't need to. It's an additional effect. Remember, kicker's all about the new effect.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. Yes, indeed. It's all kicker. What else do we have? Um, there are a number of other effects on the that are actually on. So we're talking about card effects
Mhm.
that affect like zones other than the battlefield itself. We're talking about our hand. We've got our graveyard. We're leveraging these methods, and that's really where you can see kicker effects. Like I'm just glancing at a list here. We also have cards like blitz or effects like blitz, which is like or dash for that matter, where it's
Yeah.
like okay, if you kick it, the card behaves a different way. When it enters. Great, and those are consistent across multiple cards. So the keyword in it, cool, makes perfect sense. But when something's actually on the board, the other one that gets brought up in this conversation a lot is horsemanship.
Yes,
And
horsemanship.
if you're not familiar with horsemanship is one of the mechanics that we can't really necessarily map straight to kicker, but the moment you really look at it and really like ask yourself, okay, what is horsemanship? A whole bunch of mechanics fall under that umbrella as well. So horsemanship, it's funny, horsemanship was designed as a replacement for flying within one unique set where there were no flying creatures, but they wanted to have a flying allegory within the game plan. It was for Portal 3 Kingdoms, which
Yes, it
was a
was.
limited release in the Asia market back in the 90s, which had one of the smallest print runs, which is why cards like Imperial Recruiter or Imperial Seal were worth hundreds of dollars, even though being like generally worse than other options out there. Fortunately, those have seen reprints, so whatever. But but that's why they're very, very rare. It was a very unique set. In any event, it was based off of Chinese mythology, which didn't have flying monsters. Like it
Yep.
just wasn't part of the source material at all. So they made horsemanship. So horsemanship functions similarly to flying. A creature can only be blocked. If a creature with horsemanship can only be blocked by a blocker that also has horsemanship. That's so it becomes difficult to block. So, okay, what is horsemanship? Well, horsemanship is an onboard keyword mechanic on a creature that makes it that affects the way that it attacks and blocks within combat. The moment you think of it in those terms, holy cow, every onboard keyword pretty much falls into that same category, right? You got your death touch. It's like, well, do you block this or not? The thing will die if you do. Indestructible. This thing
Mhm.
will not die if you block it with a big enough creature. Do you want to block it? It changes the way that we see the game plan play out. And in a way, a lot of it functions very similarly to kicker. Or not kicker, sorry, horsemanship. It's all
I
horsemanship.
in thinking of that though, I think it kind of does relate back to kicker in a some weird way because usually you're paying some additional mana cost in some way on the creature for this ability.
Often, but you don't have the option. Most of the time, you don't have the option to
That's
not
true.
pay the kicker cost.
Okay, that's true.
So
It's
if
mandatory
you have
kicker.
it's a mandatory mandatory kicker.
There, I did it. I figured it out. It's mandatory kicker.
Fair play, man. You got me.
No,
Some
but
would just call that the cost, but no, it's mandatory
what's
kicker.
mandatory? You have to pay it.
You have to pay it.
But like you were saying though, like some mechanics really change how you're doing it. Like infect's a great
Mm.
one. A creature with
Oh my
infect,
goodness,
you
yes.
don't want to take the infect. Like you
No,
are blocking that, which I guess is kind of also like this creature must be blocked if done so
kinda. Yeah.
in that way, which is
Well, and
also
it's funny that
horsemanship.
100%, right? Yeah, and Infect is a great example of that. Death Touch is a good example of that too. Toxic, obviously, and similar to Infect and how that
Right.
behaves. But it's funny you mentioned that. I had a Ninja deck some time ago. It was a Sultai Ninja deck, and I ran 1-drop Death Touchers in there
Mm.
because I would swing with the Death Toucher into a decent blocker. And if the opponent knew I was running ninjas, it was a question of like, okay, well, do you block this and give up your good creature? Or because like if it was just a matter of taking 1 damage, you're gonna take that all day and not really,
Absolutely.
unless it itself is lethal, you're just like, yeah, whatever, like let the one through. But if I have an opportunity to flip this thing into, a Springleaf Avenger or something, and all of a sudden be blasting you for 6 or 7, like, now I'm gonna reconsider this, you know.
Big damage.
Um, yeah, all right, changes the way the combat works. It's a lot of fun. Ninjutsu also really cool in that regard. And
Extremely.
also, yeah, very similar to Kicker in in a couple ways. Actually, recently, okay, shout outs to all the like. There are a handful of folks I went up against on the ladder recently who were
Hmm.
rocking what is it, the ninja, the thousand ninja with like the thousand faced whatever. Anyway, I'm
The two
missing.
mana blue one?
Thou, no, the one mana blue one.
The 1 mana one. Okay,
Uh,
yeah.
that's gonna kill me.
I think it's a 1 mana 1/1, right? Ninjutsu cost is
Thousand
two.
Face Shadow, that's the one. Man, that was
Yeah.
bugging me. Sorry. I've seen that in play a couple of times, and I think that card absolutely slaps. Anyway, the mad kudos to everybody out there rocking that card. Y'all are correct. Anyway, but yeah, and that one has the kicker where if you've ninjutsu'd it, you get copies of stuff, which can get out of hand real fast and really get combat math all kinds of funky. So yeah, it's delightful. Big fan. Big fan.
Always a
yeah.
good time.
All right. Yeah, so they've done a ton of variants, but at the end of the day, a lot of them feel very similar to one another.
They do.
Yeah, like now that I'm thinking about it, you have Unearth, and then you have Encore, and then you have Flashback, and then you have like, there's so many. Yeah. The other thing that I feel the need to touch on, feel free to like derail me or get me back on track if need be. Wizard seems to have identified a number of mechanical avenues they keep going back to and have started to homogenize things more. Like with the introduction of Ixalan, they're introducing finality counters. And so now our creatures can get flashback because they were already doing that with cards like Ryvaz, where a creature would come back and it would basically perpetually gain the text if this would leave the battlefield, exile it, or if it would die, exile it. And now they have a counter for that, which honestly they probably should have had from the get-go because that became a real pain to track.
Yeah, it did. I like adding the counter definitely makes a lot of sense. But you're right. The more I think about it, mechanics are kind of coming back that sort of take an older mechanic but add a new layer to it that's easier to track. So it is revisiting something, but improving on it. I think, and like we saw that with the new Cascade, right? Discover is like a fixed cascade. When the spell, I guess, in this point, when most of the items it's on is a permanent, when that permanent ETBs, the Discover triggers. It's a discover on a value amount not equal to the mana value of the card. So it could be Discover 3, Discover 5, etc. You'll find something like you would in Cascade until you hit a non-land card of that cost. You can either choose to cast it or you can put it in your hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and as a result, too, it's funny because you have to think about, like, Discover mechanically behaves very similarly to Cascade. However, you have to think about it differently because of a couple of different pieces. Like with Cascade, you have to be casting the Cascade spell, and when you cast it, then you get the thing, right? But with Discover, you can cheat things in all kinds of different ways. If it gets countered on the stack, you're out. You don't get to, get another thing for free like you can often do. But at the same time, you get there are things like lands that have Discover activations on them, and like all kinds of weird things like that. But the other thing that's really clever, I don't think there's anything that is lower than Discover 3 in Ixalan.
I think you're right.
And that was very intentional, I'm sure, because one of the ways that you can abuse Cascade is by casting out like a 3-drop that has Cascade and grabbing like the only viable target that you have in your entire deck, which is oftentimes one of those suspend cards that has no casting cost by itself. And you just will like if you cast a Bloodbraid Elf, you will find Crashing Footfalls because it's your only viable target. With Discover, it's almost impossible to build it that way because they've designed the cards specifically so that the Discover number is very high on most of them. And the interesting one that comes to my mind right away, one of the only ETB Discover 3s that's in the set is on an Aura, a Tali's Favor.
Oh,
and so if you're going to fire that out on 3, you need to have a creature online already. And so if you have a creature online already, you have to have some kind of cheap creature in your deck or some kind of like cheap token generator to get it out there, which is likely going to be something that you might hit off of the Discover. And so as a result, like cheesing it in the way that you could cheese Cascade, you really can't do. And I think that was clever, and they designed it very well to give us Cascade the way it was intended, where like you play out a card and you just get another card along randomly for additional value. I feel like that was what Cascade was always supposed to be, and then
it got broken, and like
a handful of people broke it. Yeah,
because we initially had like Cascade and the flip side of Valky, which was a 7-mana Planeswalker.
That was ridiculous.
And just all kinds of other shenanigans. But what is Cascade
Yes. So what is
but a
Cascade?
free kicker?
I suppose
It's free kicker.
it's an additional little bonus. Yeah,
Yeah, it's free
I'm
kicker.
into it. Free kicker.
Yeah, Discovery is
Yes.
ETB kicker.
I mean, totally. Although there are also some trigger discoveries, which is kind of
Sure.
fun. You have like Chimil that can trigger on your end step and those kind of things. So
Oh,
yeah,
Infinity kicker.
infinite kicker. Yes. I love how they were like, man, the prismatic bridge is really good. You're right. What if we made it colorless and it triggered on the end step? It's like, all
Yeah,
right.
you gotta love it. At least it's only Discover 5.
I'm being reductive, exactly. You only find 5 drops, but oh no, I'm gonna have to settle for my O'Hare Castlem, my vetoes, my Wandering Emperors, my 5-mana Teferis. Oh no, whatever will I do? Yeah, there are plenty of great 5 drops you can build your deck around. It's like, oh no, I only got Vorinclex. Whatever will I do? Yeah.
Oh no,
Anyway,
only foreign collects.
oh
Whatever will
no.
happen. Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, or more likely, oh darn, I spun into my Sunfall. I guess that's you
Shoot.
know, oh man, I
Oh
guess I'll
gee
have to settle
whiz.
for this. Oh geez, yeah. But even then, if you hit a Sunfall and like there's nothing on board, you just put it in your hand. You
I
just
was
drew a
gonna say,
Sunfall
yeah.
and just have it in your back pocket. That feels great.
Well, it feels like if it
Anyway,
hits a Wandering Emperor, right? Like, oh no, a
mm-hmm.
Wandering Emperor. Guess I just put this in my hand. Oh
Yeah.
no.
I'm just don't
Oh.
worry about it. I'm just gonna sit back with this just locked and loaded, ready to go whenever. Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, that ability, but that ability to put it into your hand makes it so much better
Yeah,
for just mid-range value fest, which is what Discover clearly is um, meant to encourage. So I don't know, it's interesting.
it is. It's a really sweet kicker
Yeah,
mechanic.
it is a sweet kicker mechanic. A lot of the new mechanics that are just kicker are delightful. Not gonna lie. Yeah, it's
But
very cool.
hey, I'm excited to kick my way into Ixalan. The set is only a week away. What
Mm-hmm.
mechanics are you most excited about, and how do you think they relate to kicker and/or horsemanship? Let us know in the
Yes.
comments down below. And hey, Ham, where can the fine people find you as you descend into the lost caverns of Ixalan this week?
Absolutely. So if you want to see me kicking things, you can do so over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Hamhocks42. And as I'm saying this, my cat is on my lap. Don't worry, I would never kick you, sweetheart. It's okay.
Kitty!
I know. I'm doing all kinds of kicker nonsense over there, twitch.tv/Hamhocks42. I'm there Monday through Friday in the morning, starting around 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we just do silly jank brews all the time. I also have an independent YouTube channel that I am terrible about updating. I'm also on Instagram, and I post about I get inspired and I'll post like 4 things in a day and then go 3 weeks without posting over there. So you can find me there, because that is how it goes. And then I'm also on Twitter at Hawks42. So hopefully we'll see you in all those places. How about you, man? Where can people find you?
Hey everyone, again, you can find me, I'm Astralsflame. You can find me at Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Always spread the message that you should play Jund and/or Dragons. That is Dragons with an S between the brackets at the end. Because if you're not able to play Jund and can't play a lot of Dragons, you should at least play one. I'm always playing Standard and/or some Commander action, and next week I'll be going through a bit of a schedule change. I'll be updating the days that I stream on. I'll be starting at 6 p.m., but you'll see some announcements on my Twitter on what the new stream days will be. So be sure to keep on the lookout. And until next time, everyone, be sure to drop us a follow, keep up on the listing, and as always, we are your landlord.